In a hard struggle, I won the inheritance left by my uncle. Hi. Today I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me a few years ago. To be honest, this situation still gives me goosebumps. It's true, sometimes life can be more horrible than any horror movie. So, it all started with the fact that my Uncle Victor, who remained a bachelor all his life, suddenly left this world. He was a man quite wealthy, held a high position in his business, and owned several properties. All in all, he had no shortage of money. I always thought he was a bit eccentric, all his hobbies, strange habits, and constant trips abroad. But deep down I loved him sincerely. He was always like a second father to me, and I never thought that his leaving would affect my life so much. When my uncle passed, the whole family gathered for the funeral, and honestly, I expected there to be a discussion of the will soon afterward, those fun conversations about who would get what. I was sure my uncle would leave the apartment to me, as I had always helped him with things and supported him through the hard times. I helped him with paperwork, made arrangements with lawyers, accompanied him to important meetings. Sometimes I felt that I was not just a niece for him, but something like a personal assistant and confidant. But life, as you know, is full of surprises. The day after the funeral, the lawyers came to our house. I had no idea what they were after. At the beginning of the meeting, they showed us my uncle's will. I sat there with my hands clenched into fists as they read it out, and that's where the real drama began. The thing is, my uncle didn't leave everything to me, but to his longtime friend Helen. Suddenly she appeared on the horizon, like a character from a bad novel. Suddenly this woman started talking about how Uncle Victor had helped her over the years, how they shared ideas, and how she was always there for her. I looked at her and couldn't believe it, because she wasn't even related to us. I sat there in shock and wondered how could this have happened. Helen spoke calmly and confidently, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. She told me that her relationship with her uncle was much closer than we had realized. It turned out that they had met many years ago, when her uncle had just started his business. Helen was his first mate, supporting him through difficult times and helping him make important decisions. They became close friends, and afterward their relationship grew personal, and she always remained an important part of his life. The relatives immediately started looking at each other. I felt like the sneaky snake, as I nicknamed her to myself, could take everything. I felt the anger that filled my insides. I knew I had to fight for what my uncle had fought for so long. The next few weeks were a living hell. We went to lawyers to sort out all the nuances, how a will works, how an inheritance is divided, and what rights each of us had. I was horrified to learn that Helen also claimed a portion of the real estate my uncle had left as an investment. Then a new idea popped into my head. If I couldn't get the inheritance, I could ruin this woman's mood. I started persuading relatives and gathering information about who could be her ally in this struggle. Gradually, I tangled everything into a dense tangle of intrigue. I decided I needed to find out if her relationship with her uncle was really as beautiful as she claimed. I even started collecting evidence. It was difficult, as many relatives were quick to side with Helen. They communicated with her and claimed she was fine. At the same time, they made it clear to me that I had no right to the inheritance. I watched carefully the reactions of each family member. I saw that some of them sympathized with me, but were afraid to express their opinions openly. Others, on the contrary, tried to please Helen, hoping for her favor. But I was not going to give up. I knew I had to proceed carefully and methodically. The first thing I did was to start with the simplest of things, asking around. I talked to those who had known my uncle for years, trying to find out how close his relationship with Helen had been. I wanted to understand if she was really as important a part of his life as she claimed. I immersed myself in researching my uncle's personal affairs. I arranged for a couple of friends to help with checking various documents. We exchanged speculation that Uncle Victor might have been hiding something. He had always been secretive about relationships and never spread the word about his affair with Helen. Then I moved on to more serious measures. I started digging into Helen's past, trying to find weaknesses in her version of events. I looked through old photographs, rereading letters and documents that my uncle had once had. I hoped to find something that might cast doubt on her version of events. Little by little, I found out that they had had a brief affair a few years ago. But when my uncle discovered that Helen was cheating and living off him, he broke off the relationship and kicked her out. Thus, her claims that they had been together for a long time were not true. I realized that this was the perfect trap I could think of. Meanwhile, the relatives kept up the pressure. They tried to convince me that Helen deserved the inheritance, that she was a true friend of my uncle's. But I stood my ground. I kept looking for clues, gathering evidence, talking to different people, hoping for a miracle. Luckily, I found a few people who could corroborate these facts. I collected their testimonies and together with my lawyers, I prepared the evidence for the trial. I knew it would be difficult, but I set my mind to fight for the truth. The day of the trial came. I was more prepared for it than ever before. Helen looked absolutely more confident than ever, which unnerved me. I tried to remain calm, knowing that from now on everything would depend on the words spoken in the courtroom. As the judge reviewed the documents, I was nervous, but kept my composure. The lawyers who worked with me also looked tense, but pretended to be in control of the situation. When the judge asked for a recess, I barely waited to continue. My nerves were on edge. Back in the courtroom, the judge announced that the will would be revised. I almost shrieked with happiness, but held back. The faces of the judiciary remained completely neutral, but Helen clearly looked distressed. The trial had moved into the probate revision stage. This was the start of the real battle. We began to present our arguments and evidence. I felt that the truth was on my side. The judge, after listening to both sides, decided to revise the will. The atmosphere had built up to the breaking point. My attorney presented affidavits from witnesses confirming that Helen had taken advantage of my uncle's kindness. She had violated the trust by using his money for personal use. My job was to refute her claims that she was a close friend of my uncle. I talked about how her uncle had repeatedly tried to end their relationship, but she insisted that they were close. Helen, of course, defended her position by stating that her role in her uncle's life was significant. She claimed that his health had deteriorated after her separation from him, and she had helped him recover. But her claims were not supported by any medical records. Her uncle's treating physician confirmed that he had sought medical attention, but only after he was injured at a workout. Helen tried to claim that she had been with him at the time, but this was refuted by photographs showing her uncle with friends, but without Helen. She insisted that she was helping him look after his finances, but my friends confirmed that they were the ones helping my uncle manage his money. Their testimony was backed up by documents proving their involvement in uncle's financial activities. Helen looked more and more confused as the evidence grew. My attorney presented evidence to refute Helen's claim that she had been caring for my uncle. She insisted that she had cared for him in recent years, but medical clinic records showed that my uncle had sought medical care on his own in recent years when Helen had not been involved in his life. The judges pointed out that the medical care Helen tried to attribute to herself was actually provided by medical professionals. I watched as Helen began to lose confidence. Her face expressed confusion, her voice shaking as she answered the judge's questions. For a moment, I felt that I had a chance to win this case. The judge eventually recognized that her evidence was insufficient compared to what our side had provided. In the end, the court decided that a portion of the inheritance and real estate would go to me as the rightful heir. This was something I did not expect. My fight resulted in me not only winning the inheritance, but also restoring my uncle's honor, which seemed tarnished. She tried to protest, but there was no chance. From that moment on, my life stopped being so awful, and I realized that honesty and fairness mattered after all. I was glad I could stand up for what was mine and honor my uncle's memory, and his soul could rest easy knowing that I had fought for him with the same tenacity he had once acted for me. This story taught me a lot. You can't betray or suppress the ones you love just to achieve your goals. You fight when you have a reason to fight, and for your family, you will always be willing to do whatever it takes to preserve their honor and dignity, even if you have to endure inconvenience and hardship.